Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Michael Ween. It is May 2nd, 10:45 p.m., right after the conclusion of a great NBA doubleheader. The first round of the NBA playoffs still going on. The Knicks defeat the Philadelphia 76ers in 6 games. Today, we are here for a live edition of something very special and new that we do every once in a while here on the Raw Prospect Podcast, usually on our Patreon. And you can go check out some of our other episodes. Highly recommend that you support us on Patreon. It is free. You don't have to subscribe to anything, although if you would like to support us that way, we greatly appreciate it. Basically, the way this works is Emmy and I just ask each other questions, open-ended questions about any sport that we cover here on the Raw Prospect Podcast YouTube channel. And we just have conversations. We go back and forth, hit each other with questions. And the reason we call it gut check is because it's kind of just we don't know what's coming, and we just have to answer based on what our gut feel is at that particular moment. So welcome in. If you're tuning in live, we greatly appreciate that. And before we get into this thing, as always, I have to welcome in my esteemed co-host. What a game that was. But Mr. Emmy Nixon tuning in from Austin, Texas, a busy man himself. How are you today?
I'm great, man. I got home from work, tuned into an amazing game between the Knicks and the Sixers. Can't ask for anything more than that, man. We were originally going to record like right around 10:15, but that game was just too good to pass up watching the last bit of that game. So a little bit of a delay, but we're going to get into this thing.
Yeah, so for today's show, we're going to go for about an hour, if I had to guess. And the only rule today is the first couple questions have to be related to Major League Baseball. So I'd say like the first 2 questions from each of us need to be Major League Baseball related, and then we can branch out into some other sports. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So I guess I'll just start with a question that I've had in mind here for a bit. Looking at the Major League Baseball standings, we're about 30 to 33 games in for each team as we're a little over a month into the season. We're now in the month of May. We're 3-4 weeks away from Memorial Day, which is historically a good marker for it's like the first benchmark of the MLB regular season as far as the standings are concerned. But a big storyline here so far has been the start of one team that a lot of people thought and had in their preseason top 5 as a bona fide World Series contender, and they've started kind of slow. You probably know where I'm going with this. The Houston Astros currently sitting at 11-20, 6 games back of Seattle, who currently leads their division, tied with the Los Angeles Angels for last in that division at 11-20. And the only team that has less wins in the American League than those 2 teams is the Chicago White Sox, who are off to a historically bad start of 6-25. So my question to you, I guess, would be, you are officially worried about the Houston Astros and their ability to dig out of this hole at 11-20, and you are concerned about their ability to make the playoffs, or you're not quite at that point and you're going to wait till the end of May to see where they are.
So your question is, am I worried? Basically.
Basically, like right now, are you worried about the Houston Astros and making the playoffs, sitting 9 games below 500? Because historically, there haven't been all that many teams that have dug out of a hole this deep. You go back and look at it, but they are the Houston Astros. So, what is your level of concern?
Right now, my level of concern is if I were to scale it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably say it's a 3 or 4. Um, I think the big thing to me that I look at is you've gotten the best version of Altuve, one that we haven't seen in the regular season for a few years now. He's had a 41 hit first month of the season, which is one of the best months of his entire career. And with this start that they've been having, nothing's felt normal, but he's been the rock, like just like how it's been throughout this entire stretch of Astros baseball, getting to the ALCS year over year. It's been Altuve being the heart and soul of the lineup, and he's going to continue to be that. I think some of these guys that are slumping right now, like Abreu, I think they're eventually going to come out of this.
Okay, so you are slightly concerned, but not quite at the point where you think it's detrimental to their playoff hopes. Because when you look at it, and I kind of agree with you, if you're going to give any team a long leash, it's going to be the Houston Astros, who have made it to the ALCS, what is it, 7 consecutive years? And 7 of the last 8. They've been to 4 World Series appearances in that time, and they've won 2 of them. They still have that same nucleus from a lot of those teams. Yordigman, who started slow, but I think he'll get it going. Jose Altuve, who you mentioned, Kyle Tucker. You go down the list, right? Their pitching hasn't really been healthy yet. They've been missing Framber Valdez for periods of time. They still don't have Lance McCullers back. He could help this rotation greatly. I think Justin Verlander not having a full spring training with that injury, especially at his age, hasn't helped the situation, although he's pitched pretty good since he's returned from the IL to start the season. I do think they are going to get it going. But I think Jake Storiano talking baseball, Waking Jake on the John Boy Media channel recently has said, it's a lot easier to be good to start and then fade off and be bad than it is to start bad and then be good. But if there's any team that can do it, it's the Houston Astros. So I'm right there with you. So with all that being said, fire away with your first question.
Well, my question for you is going to be there's been a few young teams that have started off the season pretty solidly. And my question is between the Tigers and the Reds, I just want to spotlight those two teams in particular. Which of those two teams do you see, not only maintaining this, but possibly, getting into the playoffs come October?
That's a good question. For me, I like what the Tigers are doing. I really do. I like how they're building that team. They've got some really good young pitching that I really do like. They're 18-13, only 2 games back of Cleveland. At 20-11, Cleveland's been one of the best teams in baseball so far, if not the best. Kansas City is right in there in that race as well as another younger team that's been good to start the year. But I would tell you that I do think it's close, but I do think that Cincinnati would probably be my pick to maintain what they've already been doing, which is playing right about 500 baseball, and to maybe even pick it up a little bit. I just think at some point the Twins are going to go. In fact, they're already kind of going. They've won 10 in a row. I think that team is going to take off here pretty soon. They're going to jump right back into the race along with the Guardians, who look strong. I think Kansas City could be right in that mix. I just think if I were to pick the tougher of the two divisions, and by the way, the two central divisions are much better this year than they
Yeah.
were last year. But I think Cincinnati just has a better chance to compete with the likes of the Brewers and the Cubs, with kind of St. Louis and Pittsburgh bringing up the rear, and a better chance to make the postseason in the National League than I think Detroit does in an American League, which I could really see, two teams from the AL West getting in. I could see potentially three teams from the AL East getting in. Like it's going to be tough. I just think there are more teams in the American League that are going to be competing. But I like what both teams are doing. I do think, though, Ellie De La Cruz is going to be an all-star, if not this season, very, very soon. He's a legitimate young star in the sport of baseball. So it's a good question. It really is. Would you agree with that, or do you have a
Yeah,
different
yeah,
opinion?
I agree. I think Elidea Cruz is the differentiator there. I think just his superstar talent with the potential to just take over any given game, and a pretty good pitching staff as well. I think they'll get stronger as the year goes on. I think they have the possibility of making a move at the deadline because I think they're a little bit further in their rebuild process than the Tigers are. So I mean, they have a few more veterans on the team already, and they I think if it comes down to it, they can make a move at the deadline and be pretty close to where they want to be.
Yeah, I think so too. Um, and so both Emmy and I are kind of whimming up questions on the fly. So if they're not scripted in the best way, that's why. But I guess my next question would be, um, as it pertains to Major League Baseball, uh, as far as I'll just ask you this. As far as the American League East goes, um, which team are you buying? Let me put it this way: Baltimore or New York? Which team at this moment in time, based on what you've seen, are you buying as right now? Actually, we can even throw Cleveland into that conversation. Which team in the American League right now, just after 1 month, are you buying as um, the team that you're putting the most stock in to get to the World Series? Baltimore, New York, Cleveland, or any of the AL West? I know it's an open-ended question, but those are kind of the teams that stand out to me right now.
Yeah, yeah. This might be a little bit of a hot take, but I actually think it might be New York. I think they have a very similar blueprint to what we saw with the Phillies a couple of years ago when they got to the World Series. It's just, can these superstar players that hit for power and can just destroy pitching, can they get hot at the right time? And I think Juan Soto and some of the guys they've added in terms of the lefty hitting that we've talked about a lot with them. I think those will be the difference. Whether or not that can get them past, the defending champs and a team like the Rangers, who I think eventually might find it, and then of course the Orioles. Who knows? But I do think I would bet on the experience there with guys like Soto and Judge on that team.
I think right now I would err on the side of Baltimore. Baltimore just took 3 out of 4 from New York, and ultimately, when it comes down to playoff time, you never really put stock into what happened in a April, early May 4-game series in the regular season. But I do think the Orioles lineup is just so potent. It's so well rounded top to bottom. I mean, you think about the guys that are hitting in that lineup. It's top to bottom. You got to get through Adley Rushman at the top, Gunnar Henderson at the top, um, all the way down to like Cedric Mullins, Anthony Santander. Um, I mean, the list goes on and on. I think the depth of their lineup, along with the addition of Corbin Burns, plays a factor in what I think the Orioles can do. I also think their bullpen right now is a little bit more trustworthy than the Yankees. Right now, the Yankees, it's pretty much Clay Holmes, who's been lights out as a closer so far, and a bunch of dudes who are getting the job done, no doubt. But is that going to be the case come a playoff series? Can
Yeah,
they rely on that bullpen come a playoff series? And I do think that um, Baltimore's starting rotation with Corbin Burns at the top, and they haven't even, they're going to get Kyle Bradish back at some point. They're going to slot him into the 2-3 in that rotation. With kind of the uncertainty of like, is Garrett Cole going to be the is he going to be like what percentage of Garrett Cole are we going to get when he comes off this edema that he's dealing with in his elbow? I think the wild card for the Yankees is Jason Dominguez. When he gets back from Tommy John in about mid-June, say like Stanton's not hitting, although he's been really solid so far, or someone in that lineup is struggling, how much does he factor in? Because he could be a game changer. If you have Dominguez, the Martian, Soto, and Judge at the top of their powers, and then you slot back in LeMahieu, who maybe can find something, then I probably lean New York. But right now I lean Baltimore. But it is close. I think those teams are going to be flip-flopping back and forth the pretty much the entire season. And I do think that there will be a third team in the American League that gets into this conversation at some point. Right now, it's Boston. You got to give them credit for the start they've had. But although Toronto and Tampa Bay especially are struggling right now, those teams have enough, I think, to get right back into this conversation.
yeah, I
So
agree. And
it's
I
going to
think
be wild. It's going to be wild.
Yeah, and I think these races are so important because like hosting a game 7 against one of these teams could be the difference in a series. Like,
Yeah.
um, I think Yankees, Orioles, or Guardians. If I'm one of them, like I'm going all in on trying to get that top spot in the AL.
Yeah. I mean, you look at this Orioles lineup. It's like you've got Riot and Mountcastle hitting 290. You've got Adley Rushman hitting 310. Gunnar Henderson hitting 272. Anthony Sant, Joe Westberg hitting 308. Um, Ryan O'Hearn hitting 300. There's just so many guys that are hitting close to 300 in this lineup, and they mash the ball too. Um, I think Gunnar Henderson has a chance to be one of Gunnar Henderson or Adley Rushman has the chance to be in the conversation for an MVP award like this year in the American
Yeah,
League.
I
Um,
agree. Yeah.
so I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But why don't you give me one final question related to MLB, and then we'll branch out to some other sports.
My last question, MLB wise, is um, I want to do something Dodgers related, but I'm not sure how to word it. I guess um, has the Shohei, Yamamoto additions, have they lived up to your expectations so far?
Yes. Yes, absolutely they have. Um, I wanted to get back to some numbers that I saw earlier, but I believe um, Yamamoto had a bad first start. Wasn't good. I think it was the one in like the opening series against the Padres in South Korea. Um, the little 2-game set that they had over there. Um, didn't have a good first start, but ever since he's been really good. I think he's figuring it out. I don't know that he'll be like top of the line Cy Young. I don't know how long he'll be able to maintain this, but I do think he's lived up to the expectations. And then ever since like an 8-game slow start for Shohei, I think he's hitting 367 in his last 24 games. Um, he's right up there with Mookie Betts, like in the AL MVP conversation right now. I think my top three would probably be or sorry, an NL MVP conversation. But I think Shohei, Juan Soto, and Mookie Betts might be like my three best hitters so far in the Major League Baseball season. I do think those guys have lived up to the expectation. The bottom of that lineup is struggling right now, but they're going to get it going. And even with that, and even with some of the pitching questions that we've had, they're still sitting pretty at 20-13. That team's going to go very soon. Yeah, I think it's lived up to the expectation, especially with kind of the cloud that was over the Dodgers to start the season with the Shohei, Ippei player interpreter situation that played out.
Yeah.
That I think's already kind of passed by a lot of people with that resolution coming down a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, I think it's lived up to the hype,
Yeah,
especially
and
Shohei. Go
I'm
ahead.
I'm just glad that nothing weird came out of that situation. Like if the MLB had to, throw the book at Shohei, I don't know what I would have done, man. That would have been terrible for the league.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll have more MLB conversations in the month of May, but let's uh let's branch out here. This is what this episode is for. Um, you can ask about anything sports related. So we'll switch up the order now. I want you to go first, and then we'll go back and forth here for like the next 35 minutes or so.
Um.
So
Okay,
take
I think I'll do something NFL draft related. My question for you is out of out of the rookie quarterbacks taken in the first round. Um, I guess a few different questions. So, who do you think will get off to the fastest start? One. Who do you think? I'm trying to think of questions that you wouldn't just automatically say Caleb for, which is kind of difficult. Um, who do you think gets off to the fastest start come next year? And then two, who do you think? Well, I'll just start with that first question. Who do you think will get off to the fastest start next year?
um. Well, if we're not automatically going to say Caleb Williams, I think I'd be down to Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix. Um, I'm fairly certain that Bo Nix will probably start. in Denver because their two other quarterbacks are Zach Wilson and I forget who else.
Jarrett Stidham.
Jarrett Stidham. I think if Bo Nix can't beat them out sooner rather than later, you've got some serious questions to ask there.
Yeah.
But I think for the sake of this conversation, I'm fairly confident that it'll be Jaden Daniels that'll get off to the fastest start. Now, a lot of it I think will be like who they're playing to start the season, what the circumstances are, what injuries come into play.
Yeah.
But I just think with his athletic ability, he's gonna. I think people are gonna be starstruck at like just how good this guy is. I think he's gonna have a really solid NFL career, and I do like a lot of the pieces that I liked Washington's draft. I like a lot of the pieces that they already have existing in that offense. I do think I'll go Jaden Daniels just based off my gut.
Okay. Yeah. I don't hate that. It's just I don't know what to think of Washington's O line at the moment. They just cut Jared Leno, their left tackle, and then I think they took a tackle in the fourth round, but he from what I know of him, he was more of a project type. So the offensive line is definitely a question. But if anyone's going to overcome it, it's probably would be Jaden Daniels because with his running ability. But for me, I think if I'm not gonna say Caleb, I actually would go with JJ McCarthy. I and it's not really to me. It's not really about JJ McCarthy. It's more about Kevin O'Connell and the receivers they have in that building. I think they already have a solid offensive line. They already have one of the best or one of the top two wide receivers in football in Justin Jefferson, and then a good number two target in Jordan Addison. I think with the structure that they have in place, I think the style of offense will be a good fit for him as well. I think it'll just be more so about, can the chemistry get to a good enough spot quick enough to where their offense gets rolling. I think um, you could see him play pretty well out of the gate, I think.
Yeah, I could see that as well. Anything else? Or was that your only question
Um,
on the
yeah,
quarterback?
I'll leave it at that for now. We'll change it over to you.
Okay. I think I could go in a lot of different directions, but I'm gonna take us now to the college side of things.
Okay.
We'll talk about this more on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports tomorrow, but so far there have been 3 household names that have announced their return for next season in college basketball. Okay, those names are Caleb Love, or wait a minute. No, RJ Davis. Caleb Love's still up in the air. RJ Davis for North Carolina. He's coming back for another year. Ryan Kalkbrenner for Creighton, the center. He's coming back next year. And Hunter Dickinson for Kansas. He's coming back next year. Which of those 3, in your opinion, is the biggest return for their respective program? Just based on your gut.
I think it's Kalkbrenner. Honestly, I think my initial thought is like RJ Davis, his scoring, his facilitating, but with everything Kalkbrenner does for that Creighton team, their defense, I think if he left, like they would feel it. Like it's not like the UConn situation where when Sanogo left, they had Klingon, waiting in the wings, ready to go. With Creighton, I think Kalkbrenner. I mean, he's their guy in the middle, and with him having another year of experience, I think he'll come back with a little bit more to his post game, a little bit more to his offensive game. And I mean, with him in the middle, they're going to basically walk into one of the best defenses in college basketball.
I could totally see that. You could go with all three, make arguments for all three. We'll dive deeper into it on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. I think initially my mind goes to RJ Davis just because he's likely going to be the only first team All-American from this past year to come back. And with Armando Bacot leaving, with Harrison Ingram still up in the air, but probably going to keep his name in the NBA draft. I just think, as well as North Carolina recruits, they've got a kid named Ian Jackson, who's a top 10, top 15 guard coming in. They have Seth Trimble, who was a bench guy for them last year, returning. They have some good pieces. They got Cade Tyson, who's a sharp shooting wing from Belmont to transfer there. They're probably still going to pick up one or two more pieces in the portal. But I initially go to RJ Davis, but you can make an argument for Hunter Dickinson. We'll get into Kansas tomorrow. They're going to have a loaded team next year with what they've added in the portal. It's kind of ridiculous. And
Yeah,
you can also make an argument for. I think your argument though for Kalkbrenner is like as far as on the court impact goes, you might be right. Because I think he's, as we talked about during the tournament, going into the tournament, like not only is he an impactful rim protector, but he does it in such a unique way with his ability to stay out of foul trouble. And I do think with another offseason, like he can develop offensively a little bit more and be a scary player next year for them. He can be their centerpiece, kind of like Klingon was for UConn this past year.
yeah, yeah. And I do want to say one thing on Dickinson. I really like what they've done in the transfer portal just because like last year it felt like a strange fit having Dickinson in there. So I think they had to adjust things this offseason to maybe help him because last year they were they wanted to push the pace, they wanted to play fast, and it just kind of felt like Dickinson didn't really fit into that. So I think some of the moves they've made that we're going to get into tomorrow are going to be really big for them. But I'll leave it at that.
Okay, back to you.
Okay. Okay, how about this? Okay, my question for you is I'm gonna keep it with NFL. What playoff team do you see as a team that will possibly disappoint next year, and what playoff team, or for to better put it, fringe playoff team, do you think can elevate themselves into contention next year?
Okay. I need a little refresher. I'm going to pull up.
So
The
the NFC, it was Philly, Tampa Bay, Detroit, LA Rams, Dallas, and the last Green Bay and San Francisco.
Okay.
And then AFC, it was Baltimore,
Pittsburgh,
Buffalo, Kansas City,
Houston.
And then
I think just off my gut, I feel like if there is a team that's going to potentially, I think the obvious answer would be like for a team that is going to push back into contention next year, if their quarterback's healthy, for me, it would be Cincinnati. But they did lose DJ Reader on the interior of that defensive line. They have a couple players that have requested trades. They have some questions to answer, I think, before the season begins, as far as the future of T. Higgins. Is he going to play under the franchise tag? The future of Trey Hendrickson. Their offensive line still probably could use a little bit of work, although they did address that in the draft with the pick of Amarius Mims. That would be like the obvious answer, but I don't want to go like that. Won't be my answer. I think I'm really high on what Indianapolis is building. I think with their draft, I think they got a legitimate like tier 2 edge rusher in the league. He's polished, and Leatu Latu, who's going to help that defense right away.
Yeah.
I love the pick of Adonai Mitchell and the value that they got him for. I think it was 52 in the draft. I think he'll be a playmaker for them. I can't remember the rest of their draft, but I just remember really liking what Chris Ballard has done. Obviously, the question is Anthony Richardson, because we've only seen like this much of Anthony Richardson so far. But I do think the Colts are going to be solid. They were 9-8 last year. I could see them potentially getting to 10 or 11 wins. And then the teams that I think could potentially pull back a little bit are maybe the Dolphins. Like, I could see Buffalo or Miami pull back just a little bit. But I could also see Pittsburgh just because I think their team's going to be better. But there are quarterback questions, and they do have like a top 5 most difficult schedule going into next year. I know that didn't really answer your question, but
No, it did. I definitely had Miami in that list of teams for sure.
yeah,
Also, Tampa Bay was a team I looked at also.
yeah.
Among teams that I think will take a step forward, I think an underrated one is actually the LA Rams. They spent a lot of money on the interior of the offensive line. They're going away from their wide zone running game, going into a little bit more of just gap and power, and adding a lot of size to the interior of the offensive line. And I think with how well their wide receivers block, I think they're going to be able to pound the rock against teams. They're going to be a little bit of a different style of football team than what we've seen with Sean McVay teams. I think that will, lead to more wins.
Okay. We have tons of time to get deeper into those conversations. My next question, going back to college football, recently, in like the last 2 weeks, the NCAA rules panel approved two major rule changes in college football. I don't know if you saw this, but college football is officially adding helmet communication for FBS games,
Okay.
just like the NFL has. And they've implemented the 2-minute warning at the end of each half. And so those were the major rule changes that were implemented. Games featuring FBS teams will give each option of using coach-to-player communications through the helmet of one player on the field, designated with a green dot on the midline of his helmet. So that's basically the rule. Coach to player communication will be shut off when the play clock gets to 15 seconds left or the snap of the ball, whichever comes first. So I guess my question is like, it was definitely time for this. You love these rule changes. You think it was time to get away from the hand signals and signs, silly signs that they were holding up. It's time for college football to grow up a little bit. You like moving more towards the NFL style of gameplay than what it was before.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I immediately go to what it means for Texas. And I think having Sark in Quinn's helmet, I mean, that can only mean good things, honestly. Just having Sark as a guy who's, just not really telling Quinn what to look at, but just giving reminders, I guess, of what to read on a given play and all that kind of stuff. Um, Going into that kind of detail within the helmet, I think that's a luxury that NFL teams have with young quarterbacks, and you've never really had with college. So I think now that I think about it, it'll probably improve quarterback play as a whole. To be honest.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, you're up once again.
Okay. First NBA question of the night.
Okay.
Um, my question to you is: we've seen Anthony Edwards kind of ascend in this postseason.
Mm-hmm.
So my question for you is: where would you rank Anthony Edwards based on what he's done this postseason right now in terms of like just his where he stands in the hierarchy of NBA players? Like, where would you rank him?
Let me think about this. Okay. So I've got Jokic. I've got, let me think. So
Shea, Luca,
Luca,
maybe.
Shea, Embiid. I think he's probably, for me right now, back end of the top 10, like in the 8 to 15 range right now, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I
I,
think.
I think, look, sweeping the Suns and what he did in that series was the things that he can do as a basketball player are jaw dropping, legitimately. Like, I think he's, first of all, I don't know how that Georgia team with Anthony Edwards on it wasn't better than it was. I don't know how Georgia got Anthony Edwards and why their basketball program isn't better, but that's a tangent for
I know
another
why.
day. Huh?
I know why. The
Well,
moolah.
um, yeah, I just think he's he's probably in, like, if we were doing tiers of NBA players, he's probably right at the top of tier 2 for me. With a chance to very soon move into tier 1. I don't know if you agree with that. But from what I've
Yeah,
seen,
I think. I
go
think
ahead.
yeah, I think I would put him like right at the very top of tier two, and barring what happens in this Denver series, like if he maintains how he played in the Phoenix series, which was like I think 31, 8 and 6 on like 65% true shooting, and not even just the numbers, but just his control of the game had reached a level that was similar to some of those top guys. So if he maintains that in the Denver series, then I think that's when I would put him in tier one. I think it's just too small of a sample size at the moment.
Yeah. And to be at the top of tier 2 right now is like right where you want to be if you're Anthony Edwards. Like
Yeah,
you're ascending.
yeah.
Um,
22 years old.
yep. It's crazy. How much young talent? Like we know sooner rather than later, like we're closer to the end with LeBron than we are not, right? The next couple of years, he's going to be retiring.
Yeah.
Um, we're probably like on the back end of Steph's run. Like he's still great, but I don't know. We'll see what happens with that whole Warriors situation. Um, Durant's getting older, like he's not getting any younger. I think this new generation of young NBA players, Luca, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Anthony Edwards, these young superstars, even Wimby, who I think is eventually going to be in that, if not,
Yeah.
probably already is. Um, like I just think the NBA is in such great hands. Even you could loop like guys like Giannis into that conversation still, but even I think Giannis a little older than a lot of these
Yeah,
guys
I
we're
think
talking about.
Giannis is about to be 30 come this summer, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about guys like LeBron and KD and Steph, I mean, outside of those guys, he's probably going to become like the veteran superstar, and it'll just still be Luca, Shea. Like it's pretty insane how much young talent the NBA is saturated with right now.
Yeah.
Jalen Brunson, even like he's incredible.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, let me think of another question for you. Um, let's see, I could go NBA. Um, I'll just give me one team from the AFC and one team from the NFC where you would say, going back to the NFL, where you would uh like you absolutely loved their draft. Like absolutely loved what they did in the draft.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Gosh, I really don't want to say the Eagles, but it's hard for me not to. I mean, you get Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean right off the bat, and no matter what you do, the rest of the draft doesn't matter once you get those two guys. But they continued it. They picked up um, what's his name? His dad played for the Eagles as well. He picked up the linebacker from Clemson.
Jeremiah
Uh,
Trotter Jr.
right, Jeremiah Trotter. I thought that was a really good pick. I mean, not just because of the Eagles connection, but I think come year two, year three, he could be a starter for them. Um, so at the very minimum, you're looking at a draft with where you get possibly three starters, and they also got a tackle, a developmental tackle as well. And they with how they run their team, like you see guys like Jordan Mailata eventually become all pro level players. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys become good starters for them. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're so incredibly stacked, man.
Yeah, you get not only do you get those two guys in the secondary, Kenyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, but then you get good value on a guy like Anais Smith, a wide receiver from Texas A&M, in the fifth round at 152 overall, um, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the linebacker from Clemson, in the fifth round. They didn't really have that many picks. I mean, they made a ton of trades. But I think they picked, let's see, one, two, three, six players. You get Will Shipley, the running back from Clemson, in the fourth round. It was a masterclass once again by Howie Roseman. But who is your team in the AFC whose draft you would say you absolutely loved?
Uh,
Do you have a team in mind?
the team that comes to the top of my head is probably the Ravens. You get a guy you can immediately throw across from Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins, and I think it's a style of corner that they needed. I think someone who's fast and can guard the, you know, I mean, no one's gonna keep up with Xavier Worthy, but can at least kind of, cover those fast wide receivers like that. Um, so I think that archetype was something that they needed. And then they picked up. Oh man, I think it's not coming to the top of my head at the moment, the names, but I thought they had a really good draft. That's just I got to pull up the actual list.
Yeah, let me see what they did here, because I thought they had a really nice draft as well. They get Roger Rosengarten in round 2. Um, he was the tackle opposite Troy Fatanu. Um, they get Adisa Isaac, the edge rusher from Penn State, in round 3, who I think just screams Baltimore Raven. Um, Tez Walker in round 4, who was a productive wide receiver for North Carolina this past year. And then my favorite pick of their draft, to be honest with you, was TJ Tampa, the corner from Iowa State, round 4, pick 130. I thought that was just insane value for a guy with his tools. So I would rate their draft an A. I think they filled a lot of needs, but they also just got great value on the players that they got. And I honestly think you could say that for pretty much almost every team in the AFC North.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the teams in the AFC North had a really solid draft with what they had to work with. Even Cleveland, who did not have a first round pick, so they're not necessarily going to be graded as high as other teams because it's just harder to achieve a B plus A grade without having a first round pick. But I thought even some of their picks I really liked. So we'll stop there. Let's go one or
I just
two
want to shout
final.
out the Chargers though. That they had a really good draft as well. But yeah, we'll
Absolutely.
we'll, we'll continue it another time.
Let's go one or two more questions for each of us. So I'll flip it back to you.
Okay. Hmm. All right. My next question. This is a tough one. Okay. Let's let's do college football. Um, I'd say for college football, which quarterback are you keeping an eye on to kind of break out next year? I'll give you kind of a short list. I'll say Connor Wayman, Texas A&M. Um, I'll throw Shador Sanders in there, and then last guy. Maybe I'll say Jalen Milrow. Between those three, who are you highest on going into next year?
Great question. I'm probably between Shador Sanders and Jalen Milrow. But I mean, look, Shador Sanders has the tools to be a top 5 pick, the talent to be potentially even the first quarterback drafted next year. I just still have a lot of questions about what surrounds him.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
how
that's
much
fair.
has that offensive line improved? I actually did like their weapons last year. I thought they had a good receiver core. I think they get Xavier Weaver back. But they did lose Dylan Edwards, the running back, the fantastic running back that they had last year. He went into the portal. I'd probably go Jalen Milroe. I think he has the potential to be the best player on a football field, and I think I just trust the infrastructure at Alabama, and I trust Kalen DeBoer to get the most out of him next year. But I was actually thinking of if I'm going to put my stock into one guy who I think is going to break out, maybe not even break out because I think people know his name, but take it to a whole nother level next year, based on just what I believe to be true. I'd go Cam Ward at Miami. I am starting to really buy what Mario Cristobal in Miami are doing right now, especially in the transfer portal. They go get Damian Martinez, who is a fantastic running back for Oregon State. They've had a couple of really nice portal pickups here in the spring window, which just closed. I think if there's one guy outside of the three you mentioned that I picked to have a monster year, it'd be Cam Ward. And I think that coincides, I guess, with my next question because Miami is my sleeping giant. They're the team outside of the household names that you're thinking of: Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Missouri, all the SEC teams and all the Big Ten teams. Outside of those schools, Miami's the school for me that's the sleeping giant. They're the team that you could look up at the end of the day, and they could be the team from the ACC that's the highest seeded in the college football playoff. They could be the team that wins that conference that nobody's really expecting them to. Because it is, what is it, year 3 of Mario Cristobal. This is the year that they're really supposed to make
the jump,
another jump like Texas did in a way. And I could see it. Like we have questions about Clemson. Florida State lost a lot. Still think they're going to be really good. But I'm really high on Cam Ward. So I'm gonna just throw this back to you as my next question. Do you agree, or would you have another sleeping giant that you think is going to break out next year, and surprise people? Like, do you think it could even be a team like, I don't know, like USC? Do you think they get the train back on the tracks? Do you think I don't know.
Well, I think I would point to a team like Utah, getting Cam Rising back
Yep,
healthy.
that's a good
Uh,
one.
I think he's going to remind people just how good he is, and the style of football they play over there, man. Like I think they're going to go into the Big 12 and hit some people in the mouth, man. Like it's going to be a revelation. It's a different style than what that conference typically sees. So
That's a good one. Yep.
I think Utah, but I definitely do agree with you. Miami, I think. I mean, I really like Cam Ward. Um, I actually hadn't heard about the running back pickup they made until now. That's pretty big because I actually remember that Oregon State player. Like he completely went off against Washington State, I think it was. Coincidence that Cam Ward wanted that guy? I don't think so. But yeah, I mean that their team, they're building something really good there. Like they're the team that out of the ACC is using the transfer portal properly, plus has the money, and I think they have the right coach. So they're definitely going to be a team to be reckoned with come next few years.
Yeah, and they're recruiting now at like a top 10 elite level.
Yeah.
It takes a little while for it to become like Mario Cristobal's team with his players and to filter out a lot of the fat that was there when he got there. because they've been down for a while. But I do think Miami and Utah are great picks to be like the sleeping giant next year in college football. Okay, well, that was my question. So why don't you ask me one final question, and then if I have another one, we'll get to it, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Okay. Um. Hmm.
And
Okay.
there are things we haven't touched on yet, but you pick. Go ahead.
Okay. I think I'll go over to the NBA again. Something NBA playoffs related. So my question to you is, um, it's a two-part question. So in the West, out of the Timberwolves, Thunder, Mavericks, which of those teams do you see having the best chance against the Nuggets? And then in the East, out of the Knicks, um, and I guess out of the Knicks, Magic, or Cavs, do you see any of those teams, taking the Celtics, deep in a series?
Okay. Um, I I could see the Knicks taking Boston 6, maybe 7. I mean, the way Jalen Brunson's playing right now, I love the way that they play. We talked about this on our NBA episode on Monday or Tuesday.
There's definitely parallels with them and some of the things Miami does.
Yes, I do think their physicality, um, their ability to just demoralize you with their ability to rebound, uh, hit threes. Like Josh Hart hit a humongous three tonight. Dante DiVincenzo has been really solid. OG Anunoby, like they can throw him on Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum. Um, and Jalen Brunson, like the way that he's playing right now is first team All NBA good. He can go win a game by himself. Um, I don't I like the Magic and what they do defensively. I do still maintain that I think they're going to win that series, but I don't know that they have enough juice. I don't know that they're ready for that yet. And then in the West, what was it again? It was Minnesota, Dallas.
Dallas, OKC.
Um, I'm probably between Minnesota and Dallas. Um, I do really like the matchup of Minnesota and Denver. I do think Minnesota is going to give them a series, 6 or 7 games. Uh, I just I'm tempted to say Dallas. I just am kind of worried about Luca and his knee, that situation right now. I don't know
Yeah.
if you have any more information about that that I don't know, but I'd probably say Minnesota, but I do think Dallas could give them some issues. I think Kyrie's playing at a really high level. Um, and I'm just not quite there yet with OKC. I need to see a little bit more. But that's kind of where I stand. I'd go Minnesota and New York. Not that they'll win that, not that they'll beat those teams, because I do have Denver and Boston still as my finals matchup. But I do think those teams could give them a good run for their money.
Yeah, I think um,
Especially considering the way that if Anthony Edwards continues to play like this, I do think Minnesota could be a really tough matchup. But I want to hear your opinions.
yeah, honestly, this is kind of like a quasi preview for that series, but um, I really think it comes down to Cat. Um, in that Minnesota Denver series. Like I really just think if Karl Anthony Towns can make Nikola Jokic work while staying out of foul trouble, that can be a huge, you know, turn in that series because you allow Rudy Gobert to kind of be that roamer rim protector guarding Aaron Gordon, who's been really struggling from the 3-point line. And I don't think Aaron Gordon is going to be able to get those lobs that they like to hook up on with Rudy Gobert there. And I also think that also allows, Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels to just kind of lock in to those shooters on the outside. Um, I really like the idea of Minnesota going with Anthony Edwards as kind of the lead guard. I don't think it'll be a Mike Conley series. I think he's someone that Jamal Murray and that Denver team can attack a little bit. So I like the idea of them going with a lineup of Edwards, McDaniels, Alexander Walker, Towns, and then Gobert. I think that would be a really, really formidable closing lineup for them.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I'm trying to think if I have anything else. We've talked NFL, we've talked NBA, we've talked baseball, we've talked college football, we've talked college basketball. I don't know. Do you have anything else on your mind? I'm trying to think if I do.
Well, I just do want to say something about the Sixers real fast.
Go ahead.
The way they went out tonight was just tough to watch, man. Like I'm not even a Sixers fan, like not even remotely close to that. But to have your season end on a wide open three, I know it's Josh Hart and he's not a good 3-point shooter percentage wise, but he's an NBA player. Like I just don't like the idea of having your season end on a wide open spot up shot.
I agree.
It's just that to me is just really tough to swallow if you're a Sixers fan.
Yeah. What else could there be? I'm trying to think of anything. Are there any stories in the past couple days that we've missed?
Well, I've been watching a bit of the UEFA Champions League lately. The semifinals, the first leg of the semifinals just happened. I think Bayern Munich and Real Madrid are tied going into the second leg, and that's going to be played at Real Madrid, which is going to be pretty insane. And then I think PSG is down 1 to Dortmund. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the Champions League. I think it's pretty sick. Like just the concept of it, I think, is such a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much it on my end. I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but we'll probably address most of the stuff on future podcasts. So I think we're good on that front, unless we have anything else comes to mind. Thank you guys for tuning in. We do this probably once a month, if we can. Every month to 6 weeks, we do a gut check. Some will be live on the channel, some will be reserved for Patreon, but either way, check us out. We'll be live tomorrow evening sometime. We're planning on 2 episodes, so
yeah, a little bit earlier than.
Yep, it will be earlier than 10:30, and then we'll continue to put out 2-3 episodes per week throughout the entirety of the NBA playoffs. We'll have Major League Baseball content mixed in here in another couple weeks. We have some ideas that we're thinking about for down the road once we get further on into the season. If you have ideas for us, throw them in the comments. Absolutely going to be covering the NBA playoffs, start to finish. We'll have some more NFL content, I would say, through May, and then we're probably going to take June off.
Yeah.
Probably a month and a half until we get to training camp. But we'll keep up some of the NFL content through May for sure, since there's still like rookie mini camps and still some free agents that are unsigned. We're still coming off the high of the draft, so and we have these team episodes that we have planned that we need to get through. So we'll keep that up through May, and then we'll probably shift our focus more so to the NBA Finals. We've got another major coming up in golf here in a couple weeks. We're still going to be doing Dit Hole. And then, yeah, I mean, anything else that comes up will be here. So make sure you like and subscribe. And any parting shots before we get out of here?
My parting shot is that I'm gonna try and count and see what episode we're on because I think it's like in the 230s. I think.
Yeah, it's got to be at
But,
least that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check and see.
Got to be at least that, and that might be like not including Dit Hole.
Yeah.
I don't know how many Dit Holes we've done at this point. It might be getting up closer to 70.
I'm not 70, exactly 75 sure. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for us. So you guys have a great night. Tune back in tomorrow for Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports in another episode that will be announced later. And we'll see you next time. Peace out.
Peace.